This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Justice Pending. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan. And Claire, today's case is one you're quite familiar with, am I right?
You are. So as I've been out, on my book tour for Killer Story, The Truth Behind True Crime Television, I have been getting questions at every event about, is there a serial killer in Austin? This comes up every time I do an event, and I decided that we needed to do an episode of the podcast on it, Susan.
Well, sure. I mean, you're getting the question. People think you have the answer. So let's investigate.
Right. So let's dive into this case. It's part mystery, part public panic, and entirely unsettling. It's about a growing number of bodies, 38 and counting, pulled from the waters of Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas.
That is a lot of bodies.
Yes.
And some people, because of the number, are calling it the work of a serial killer. They're calling the serial killer the Rainy Street Ripper, they say. But others like police, medical examiners, and the skeptics say, okay, these deaths are tragic, but explainable, giving a number of reasons like alcohol accidents, mental health issues, and a lake with dark trails and dangerous access points all around.
Yeah, so what's really going on? Let's back up. Lady Bird Lake stretches 6 miles through the heart of Austin. It's also called Town Lake. That's what I've always called it. It's got a lot of activity around it. On one side, there's music venues, food trucks, and crowds on the popular Rainy Street. On the other, we have this body count that just keeps rising.
Yeah, so this is actually going back a few years. It's going back to 2022. So since then, at least 38 bodies have been pulled from the lake. 30 of those victims are men.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And
right.
60% were between the ages of 30 and 49. So it's, people look for patterns, and they started seeing a pattern here. Men between this age range.
Yeah, it's a similarity, and also that's not a common profile for murder victims.
Right.
They're usually female. They're usually in some type of domestic situation. So it just gets even stranger that over half of the victims have these commonalities. But here's the thing. Most of these cases have not been ruled homicides. Only one, Josue Moreno, was confirmed as a murder. He was shot and his body was found in a submerged truck. And police actually arrested someone for that one.
So, yeah, and the rest, they're saying accidental drowning, suicides, undetermined. But there is one catch. In many cases, friends and family aren't buying it. They say their loved ones weren't suicidal, they were healthy, and they were out with friends when they disappeared.
Yeah, and they were last seen on Rainy Street.
And so Rainy Street is a nightlife district packed with bars, music, and foot traffic. It's also a short, unguarded walk from the lake's edge. So bartenders have said, or bartenders that have spoken publicly along there, they say they've noticed a pattern too.
Yeah, so a lot of people have been covering this story as, attention just continues to grow on, the number of deaths. Like every time there's another one, it seems like it catches kind of some new steam. So it started out like social media, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, and now it's been picked up by all sorts of media outlets and podcasts. Texas Monthly, did a big piece on it, kind of debunking the theory of there being a serial killer in Austin, and people were very upset. saying that, that they were part of the police cover up, and, the idea that there's something else going on, and no one's willing to admit it, right? Because it's too scary to say that there's a serial killer out there. But it really it does look like a lot of people are very thoughtfully assessing the situation. So, these bartenders who've come out and spoken to Texas Monthly and in other local media, they say that young men, especially like white or Latino, sometimes gay, often alone, would vanish for closing time. And, being near closing time, a lot of these men are also intoxicated. And so, a few days later, their bodies would be found in the water.
Yeah, and I think there's a theory that it's not just alcohol, that these men are being drugged and then they're being preyed upon with, date rape drugs and dumped in the lake. And that's why they're showing up there.
Yeah, so there's a forensic psychiatrist, who's gone on the record, Dr. Carol Lieberman, saying that, she believes that the consistency among the victims, same age range, same gender, is statistically suspicious. And she believes that law enforcement may be quick to rule out foul play, and, that it possibly deserves like more scrutiny.
Yeah, so let's talk about a few of the people behind the headlines.
Yeah, so Jason John, 30 years old, found in February 2023, and was last seen walking home from Rainy Street. So, fits the profile, and, on foot. I think that's a key detail here, except for the one guy that was found in a submerged truck who'd been shot.
Right.
People are walking. You don't think of, Texas being very walkable, but Austin is actually the exception to that, and is a very walkable town. And a lot of people travel, on foot. 6th Street, Rainy Street, the areas where there's lots of nightlife, people like to bar hop. And, I've certainly been down there and gone, walking around Town Lake. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful area, but it's actually not at all, there's no barriers. There's not, like big metal fencing. There's some walkways. There's some areas that have, some rail guards. But if you just walk, if you're just walking straight out into the area of the lake, you could very easily end up in the water.
And
And
like
it's quite dark. There's
is it like
Yeah.
loose gravel? Okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot of lighting. There's pathways. People run, do yoga. I've seen any number of activities in that area at all hours of the day and night. But it's also very secluded. And even though, you're so close to downtown, like right on the, abutting it, it's actually very dark. It's not well lit at all. And so, yeah, just the idea that you're walking home, and there's this big danger, right? Beside you, this body of water.
Yeah, it does seem a little irresponsible that they put bars with no barriers, but I mean, maybe that's to preserve nature.
I think
I
so. Yeah, because it's very much like a natural, area, and people love the hiking and canoeing and swimming and other things in that area. There are, some, rails and guardrails and things, but um it's not everywhere. There's certainly areas to get into the water.
Right. I think going back to these age ranges, there's Jonathan Honey, who was 33 years old.
Yep.
He was last seen near a food truck on Rainy Street. He was found dead in April of 2023. There's something to be said for the demographic that would be out bar hopping at night. So yes, it's statistically significant, but maybe that's self-selecting for the neighborhood at that time of night.
Yeah. Yeah. So another victim, Christopher Hayes Clark, who was 30, he was found near Longhorn Dam, and his cause of death is unknown. He was actually a father, and his partner, has begged police to reopen the case for their son. And it's really so sad to think that these families are um searching for answers, and they don't know what happened to their loved ones, and they don't know, was this a tragic accident or were they murdered?
Yeah, I mean, there's a 17-year-old, so young,
Yeah.
17-year-old found floating, just about a year ago.
Yep.
And police called it a tragic accident, but again, his family is not buying it. And, they reignited calls for a real investigation into the entire string of these deaths going back to 2022. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's
there.
definitely a heated issue. For every person calling for answers, there's someone else saying, this is not a serial killer. Like, calm, cooler heads should prevail. Experts, journalists, even podcasters, have said this might be a case of serial killer hysteria.
Yeah, and even, Kate Winkler Dawson, who's a University of Texas professor and host of the podcast Buried Bones, she told reporters that if police thought these were connected, that they would act like it. And she doesn't see urgency along those lines.
Yeah, I was actually on Kate's other podcast, which is called Wicked Words, talking about Killer Story. And, Kate's really thoughtful, and she's embedded in that area of Austin, as a professor at UT. And I thought that her perspective was really interesting and valuable. And I think that as much as people want like an answer to all of these deaths, like, sometimes the answer is the unsettling, reality that this is not something that we can kill the boogeyman, right? This is not it doesn't seem, like, if there really was a serial killer, that the Austin police be like, no, we don't, we're not going to look into that. Like, the Austin police are actually, one of um a very large police force that's, I've worked serial killer cases when I was a producer for 48 Hours on CBS, that the Austin Police Department did a fantastic job connecting. There
Mhm.
was actually a serial killer case, gosh, it was 2018 when I was at the trial. And it was, a series of home invasions that didn't seem like they were connected. But they ended up, the Austin Police Department was able to connect this one landscaper who was going, kissing houses that he was working on, and then going back and trying to rob the homes, and actually had a really sadistic partner who wanted to
Oh,
kill the inhabitants. He was, one guy was just in it for the jewels, and the other guy was like had like bloodlust. It was really disturbing. But the killers were Timothy Parlin and Sean Gant Benalcazar. If you want to Google them, um, but they were technically serial killers. They killed 3 people in Austin, and Austin Police Department was fantastic in looking at the similarities of those crimes, and putting it together. So it's interesting to me, with 38 bodies across 3 years, if the Austin Police Department thought there was a connection, I definitely feel like they would investigate that. I think the fact that these victims are, drowning to death
mm,
with high levels of alcohol in their system, that in a lot of ways kind of does answer questions, even
right.
though it's probably not in a satisfying way. Um, but if they had other types of, if they had been signs of a struggle, if they had, injuries to their face or defensive wounds, I think that would really point um, toward a killer, toward murder. But the idea, I'm sure they're doing toxicology tests. They've talked about the theory of the date rape drug. You have
Right.
to wonder about that. If they're pulling these bodies from the lake, they're usually able to get some type of, um, blood evidence, or they can even take liquid from the eye. I've seen that in other cases.
Oh,
Yeah. and determine, if there's like what the toxicology is. So yeah, some say that social media is fueling the panic, true crime Facebook groups, TikTok sleuths, even YouTubers claiming to know what really happened. But I don't think there's not a clear answer at this time.
Yeah, I mean, there's influencers out there that, have even gone so far as to blaming mythical spirits of the lake. So,
Yeah.
that's like, that's really not helping.
Right.
It doesn't not, it sounds to me like the town of Austin or city of Austin should put up more barriers in these places if the entry points are
Yeah.
common.
I agree. I mean, I feel like one way that to possibly quell, this fear and panic and the anxiety would be, if you put up some better lighting, let's put up some street cameras, let's,
Yeah.
block access, to the water. I'm sure people would have issues with that, for lots of reasons, but I think there are steps that could be taken to prevent these deaths if they are accidental drowning deaths. These these efforts would really make a difference.
Yeah, but at the bottom line is the human brain does love a pattern. So, what seems random can be look like a pattern, especially when there's like fear and grief and mystery involved. So, I think that's why it's perpetuating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's knowledge is power, and there's a lot of um information out there now about this that people can use to hopefully try to keep themselves and people that they love safe. Never a bad idea to to be extra cautious when you're going out at night and you're leaving a location on foot, whether you're being cautious about if you're being followed or, letting someone know where you are. These are things that, always look at things that help you not be an easy target for any type of person who would wish you harm. And I think that, it's always a good practice to do these things. And hopefully people in Austin are, paying attention and doing things that they can, in their own control to try to stay safe.
And don't drink near bodies of water, people.
Right. Gosh. Yeah, no, it really is sound advice, Susan.
Yeah. Words to live by.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
I was just gonna say, like, there are a lot of unanswered questions. I don't think we can close the book completely on, what's going on Rainy Street. But that doesn't mean, that we have to go full tilt on the serial killer theory. I think there's kind of a place in the middle where we can keep our eyes open and also not lose our heads.
Exactly. But the bottom line is that 38 lives have been lost. And, they were sons, partners, friends. I mean, these were real people and with real families with answers.
Yeah, whether they were the victim of a murderer, a broken system, or a series of tragic accidents, we owe it to them to keep asking questions.
Yes, because as we all know, when a community is afraid and families feel ignored, justice can't be considered done.
So we'll keep watching this one. And if you're listening from Austin, please stay safe and stay aware and know you're not alone. Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanama, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air. Thanks for joining us.